We've got one more night to go at the DNC. The final night of the convention looks back at the week, and we'll finally hear from presidential nominee Joe Biden. So we are going to bring in Spencer Critchley. Spencer, you were a communications specialist under the Obama administration, and today on social media, everybody's talking about the former president's speech. Take us in his mind. He broke precedent in sort of bashing his successor, and that's not common. So why do you think he chose to go that direction?
I was on both of the campaigns, by the way, not in the actual administration. It was so powerful. I agree with the comments that we've seen in social media that I was either crying or trying not to cry through much of the evening. And President Obama, I thought, got right to the point. The reason it's so important this year is we're not talking so much about the Democratic Party against the Republican Party as we're talking about democracy itself. And while normally I would say we have to stop demonizing our opponents and making it all about moral judgments about the character of our opponent because that's destructive of democracy, in this case, the number one issue we face actually is the character of the incumbent president. That is the terrible crisis that America is struggling with, is that we elected somebody who's just completely unfit for the office, both in terms of his personal character, his integrity, and his basic competence. So, he's essentially corrupt and incompetent is how I would summarize President Trump. And that is a crisis for our country. And I think that President Obama, who would normally be very reluctant to speak that way, saw no other choice.
Aside from sort of the pomp and circumstance of those speeches and something maybe many folks weren't necessarily expecting to hear from President Obama, we also last night at the convention started to see a little more conversation about policy and kind of some narrowing to some of those issues, but not much. And so I wonder, we've kind of asked our guests this every day, what do you think voters can be taking away from the convention, especially maybe middle to right voters who are trying to learn about the Democratic Party and what the Harris-Biden ticket will bring to the country from a policy standpoint? What have we learned from the convention so far?
One of the best things about this convention, I think, is that Democrats have overcome a traditional habit they've had, frankly, of being too much in their heads. If I may, I have a new book that's kind of about this called Patriots of Two Nations, about the division of our country into two nations, one more kind of head and reason-oriented and the other one more heart and faith-oriented. And for all their strengths in being committed to science and reason, Democrats sometimes campaign as if they're reading from a list of bullet points. That's not something President Obama ever did, and that's why he was so successful against incredible odds, I would say. And I think the influence of Obama campaign veterans has shown in this convention in that, yes, there has been all kinds of substance about the most important issues of our time, like race relations, climate change, the existential threat of climate change, gun violence, and the rest. But presented in terms of values and connecting at the heart level, which is how you really reach people and motivate people. The substance matters, but people end up deciding based on values and emotions. And I think that's what's going to reach a large majority of voters. We have to hope it will, not just on the left, but in the middle and on the moderate right, conservatives of conscience, as I sometimes refer to them.
Speaking to that, let's talk about Hillary Clinton's speech. It struck me as very poignant that I don't know that she necessarily was doing all that much although she said very complimentary things of the Biden-Harris ticket, it seemed like her job was to remind Democrats and maybe even voters more broadly, don't let what happened to me happen again. Was that her purpose?
Absolutely, and especially what happened to the country. I think one of the downfalls of being as prosperous and successful as this country has been, especially since World War II, is we've had several generations now who grew up kind of in the position of being born rich and having inherited all kinds of blessings that we didn't have to work for. Now, that's certainly not true of everybody in America. Many people have had to struggle as much as ever, but many of us have been incredibly privileged and have not had to worry about where this amazing system came from or worry about who's taking care of it. It turns out it was supposed to be us. And a lot of people have started over the years to see their vote as some kind of consumer experience, I think, or some sort of self-realization experience where they need to pursue the absolute optimum experience for them personally, as opposed to understanding that the fate of the country is at stake. And it could hardly have been clearer when Hillary Clinton went up against Donald Trump. And we heard people saying, "No, I can't vote for Hillary Clinton, and they're all the same, and I don't see any difference between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump." And that was driving me, and I think a lot of people, just absolutely to distraction at the time. We could see what was coming, and now, unfortunately, the country has had to experience what was coming.
All right, so one more night to go. The RNC is next week. What are you expecting out of the RNC now that the Democrats have formed their ticket and for the most part, at least, although we still have tonight to watch, have kind of laid out their presentation for the country, and specifically for those voters who are mid to right?
I expect the contrast will be just absolutely stark. This, more than perhaps any campaign I'm aware of, is a campaign of hope against fear, inclusion against exclusion, love against hatred, ultimately. Now, I want to draw a distinction between Republican voters and the current Republican Party and the current leader of the Republican Party. Current leadership is appealing to the absolute worst in human nature, and the worst in human nature is present in all of us. So this is not just a problem of Republicans at some essential level. There are many good people who voted for Donald Trump thinking they were making the right choice. More and more of those people are waking up to realize how unworthy he was of their trust. But the leadership led by Donald Trump is going to exploit the absolute worst in people next week. And as they have been, they will be lying their heads off with no shame, no concern for the truth, and trying to exploit fear, basically, to make people hate each other. And ultimately, that's what's at stake in this election, is what kind of country do we want to live in? Do we want to live in a country of fear and resentment and hatred? Or do we want to get back to a country that was supposed to be founded on hope for the future and increasing inclusion of all Americans? I just want to say, by the way, the selection of Kamala Harris as the vice president is an example of that future. She is all-American. Her identity is all-American. She represents what this country was always intended to be.
All right, one more night of the DNC we'll all be watching. Spencer Critchley, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.